Hi, Econ 201 students. As I did with the last module, I wanted to take this opportunity to connect some of the material we're learning in this module to what's going on in the broader world around us. And I thought that using the competition and the invisible hand portion of the module would be an excellent way to make that sort of a connection. So if you recall from the very first portion of the very first module, we talked about the invisible hand. And the invisible hand is this idea that individuals acting in their own self-interest can promote broadly socially beneficial outcomes that are no part of their intention, no part of their design, just a byproduct of acting in their own self-interest. Individuals can produce these sorts of broadly socially beneficial outcomes. We also talked about the great economic problem, and the great economic problem is simply how to allocate scarce resources to satisfy as many human needs and as many human wants as possible. And so this chapter really connects some of those some of the ideas that we've learned throughout earlier modules in a big way here. So I'm going to focus in this video on invisible hand property number 2, which is in the second of those videos that we're watching. And that's the idea that self-interested entrepreneurs can maximize the total value of production across industries. So we know that entrepreneurs' main goal is to make a profit. Profits are, they send signals to entrepreneurs. When entrepreneurs are making profits, that sends a strong signal that consumers value the products or services that entrepreneurs are providing, and that entrepreneurs should continue doing those things, that the services or goods that are being provided are allocating resources in a highly valued way. When entrepreneurs are making losses or profits are falling, well, that also sends a strong signal that consumers do not highly value what is being produced, and that the total value of resources could be higher, that some resources could be reemployed in a more productive way. And so we can think of a variety of different resources here. Human labor is a scarce resource. Physical capital, machinery and tools and things like that are scarce resources. Time is perhaps one of the scarcest resource. And so when entrepreneurs are realizing losses or when profits are falling, that's a strong signal that some of these resources could be productively reemployed in another way. Now I am seeing this in a big way in the current global economic climate here. The pandemic as a byproduct has led to sort of as many of you noted in your discussion board responses to my last question, there's been a byproduct of the pandemic has been a sort of a decline in economic activity. And so I'm going to pull up a slideshow. We'll see how this goes. Let's see. There's my PowerPoint to show how I am seeing entrepreneurs who are realizing losses, reemploying their valuable resources in new ways that are sort of helping solve the great economic problem. I have Anheuser-Busch here. As the sort of economy has taken a bit of a dip here, individuals are not buying consumer items in the quantities that they were purchasing them before. So many companies are seeing declines in profits, including beer companies. People just simply are not buying things in the same quantities they were before. And so Anheuser-Busch rightly has noted that perhaps some of the resources that are tied up in making beer could valuably be reemployed in making hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer, as I'm sure all of you know, has gotten extremely scarce. And so Anheuser-Busch, seeing that the resources that were previously tied up in making beer could be valuably reemployed elsewhere, are shifting some of their beer production into making hand sanitizer. L'Oreal, the makeup company, similarly, realizing some losses. People aren't buying. I mean, heck, so many people are staying at home. There's no need to put on makeup and purchase new makeup, right? And so L'Oreal is another company that is shifting some portion of its production into making hand sanitizer. Louis Vuitton's parent company also. I mean, people, if they're not buying normal consumer goods in the same quantities that they previously were, they're certainly not buying luxury goods in the same quantities that they previously were. So L'Oreal also is, or Louis Vuitton's parent company also is shifting some of its production, moving some of its resources into from an area where they were not as highly valued into an area where they are more highly valued, and that is in the production of hand sanitizer. Now, the fabulous thing about the invisible hand here is that there is no central body, there's no central authority that is saying to these companies that they need to re-employ some of their scarce resources into making hand sanitizer. This is just companies seeing a decline in their profits, and seeing an unmet need and moving some of their production from where it is not as highly valued to where it is more highly valued. Similar to the Louis Vuitton case, certainly designer clothing is not selling in the same quantities as it was before. So designer Christian Siriano's sewing team has now been converted into making masks for healthcare workers. I'm sure you are all aware of the global shortage on masks for healthcare workers. And so the labor and the physical capital and the material that was previously being used to make designer clothes is now being re-employed more productively into making masks for healthcare workers in this case. Perhaps some of you have heard that James Dyson of Dyson vacuum cleaners and hair dryers and things like that, in 10 days created a new ventilator to help fight the pandemic, and is rushing production in Britain now. My understanding is in the US, the FDA is kind of holding this up, but I mean, these sorts of vacuum cleaners, people are putting off purchasing new vacuum cleaners and things like that. And so James Dyson is re-employing the resources and the human capital that was previously being used to make vacuum cleaners into making ventilators. Moving those resources again from where they are not currently as highly valued into a use where they are currently much more highly valued. This one's been really fascinating to me, as there have been a number of countries, not countries, states and localities across the U.S. have shelter in place and other sorts of restrictions, or have actively shut down restaurants, and have moved restaurants into you can only produce for delivery or for takeout. Well, there are many restaurants that have seen huge declines in their profits, huge declines in their sales. And so restaurants have already purchased all of these goods. And so in order to try to recoup, not even to become profitable, to try to recoup some of those losses, many restaurants, I don't know if this is nationwide, but definitely in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, have been selling their supplies off in these quarantine kits, or they have different names, survival kits. And so, for example, Whiskey Cake, which I have a clip here, has these quarantine survival kits. And you can go, and it's a great deal. For like $40, you get eggs and bread and vegetables, and some of them include, cocktails and things like that. And so, we've seen huge shortages at grocery stores as people have gone and bought up all of these things. And at the same time, we have seen restaurants who are unable to use all of the food that they have already purchased. And so instead of just having that food rot on the shelves, these restaurants have turned into sort of general stores almost. And so they're moving those resources from where they're not really being valued at all, into areas where they are very highly valued, into consumers' homes. And so these are businesses who are realizing losses, are realizing that the goods and the human capital and the labor that they currently are currently being underemployed, you can say, and are seeing ways to move those sorts of goods and resources and capital into areas where they are more highly valued. And so I think these have been excellent, excellent examples of the invisible hand in action. Now, I should note that in some of the cases that I brought up, the production, Siriano, for example, is donating the masks. The beer companies are donating the hand sanitizer, and so they're not trying necessarily to make a profit. But it is nonetheless the case that these companies are not being mandated by government to make these sorts of things. They are simply responding to economic incentives. And I think that's an excellent example of the invisible hand at play. So I'm going to put another discussion question on the discussion board, and I hope some of you will be able to find some of these invisible hand in action examples, either from the current crisis or from the invisible hand is in action all the time. So I hope some of you will be able to find other interesting examples for me. Thanks so much.